Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Good evening. Welcome to Conversations Across Time. Our regular viewers will recall that this is the third segment in a series that we're doing concerning the politics of clean water. And joining me tonight, of course, as always, is my co-host, Babette Josephs, former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs. Welcome, Babby.
Thank you, thank you. My
Thank
pleasure.
you for being here.
I love it.
I'm loving this discussion, and I'm hoping that we will get some information out that will help our audience concerning our topic, clean water. Seated to my far right and your left is Sextus Julius Frontinus. Welcome, Senator Sextus.
Glad to be here.
What a heart he has.
What a heart, what a heart. It's a Roman heart. And seated next to Senator Sextus is the 26th President of the United States, President Theodore Roosevelt. Welcome, President Roosevelt.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
I'm glad that you decided to come back because your involvement with conservation is something that we really want to make certain the audience understands, so thank you.
I agree.
Seated to my far left is Grace Ogot, who is an author, a leader, was a leader in the country of Kenya, the first elected official to the Congress of Kenya.
Woman, female.
Female, I'm so sorry. Female elected to the Congress of Kenya, and also someone who has been very involved in training regarding the uses of water and ways to harvest water. So thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
And seated next to Ms. Ogot is King Khamurabi, who was the king in Babylon from the years his reign was 1792 to 1750 BCE. Welcome back, King Khamurabi.
Thank you.
When we stopped last week, we were involved in a discussion regarding the economic disparity and water in terms of how classes, I would say the lower classes are going to end up fighting over water because we are in a position now that this country seems not to understand.
Poorer people, you mean?
Poorer people. I'm so sorry. But
And in this country, when we talk about poor people, we are very often talking about people with brown or black skins or speak a different language than English, or not always, but mostly.
yes, and the fact that those populations are going to be severely hit by the water shortage that is happening in this country now. And if you recall, last week, President Roosevelt and Senator Sextus had a conversation about what is going on in Flint, Michigan. And I was happy that you, as visiting us from another time frame, are able to see that what's going on in places like Flint, Michigan are just unbelievable in terms of the technology that is available and the fact that there's income disparity plainly on view there.
It would have never happened under my watch in Rome, and I wish I were the water commissioner of Flint or of the United States.
And we consider
and
that
I would solve the problem.
we consider that we're more advanced than you, and we should be ashamed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason except for greed and prejudice that those people in that city, in that urban area.
We know that. We know that because they consciously made decisions to switch them to a water supply that they all knew was contaminated. They all knew it, except for the people who were using it.
And they didn't even, we even knew about lead, and we knew that you had to calcify the aqueducts to make sure the lead did not get in the water, and they didn't even realize or do any kind
They
of
didn't care.
That's a better way of putting it. They didn't care.
But that of course is in keeping with the fact that the Dakota pipeline is going to be running directly through to have an impact rather on the water supply of the Native Americans at Standing Rock. That again is a disenfranchised population, and so the powers to be do not care. I mean,
they avoided Bismarck, right?
They avoided Bismarck.
Because
it's
a city all full of some people who are white, I guess, but Native Americans aren't white, so they didn't care.
And see, the thing that's interesting
They did
about
not care.
The Army Corps of Engineers was very clear to say that the Dakota pipeline was going to be harmful to the water supplies that it traversed. So this is not anything that's hidden. While we're exposing this as a crisis, I want our audience to be clear. The United States government knows that the impact of the Dakota pipeline will have on the surrounding population.
They created the crisis.
And they simply don't care.
And they don't
To
care.
your point, Ms. Ogot, when you were talking about the water supplies going past this affluent community in Kenya, and people having to walk past this affluent community that has 24-hour water service to collect water. So that's just a little catching up. But I want...
the 24-hour water service, you're referring to indoor plumbing?
Indoor plumbing.
In Nairobi, most of Nairobi is indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
But you
Except
go to
the
this
slums.
enormous slum, which has more than, people have no idea how many people live there, maybe 2 million. Maybe only a million. Only a million people living like horrible conditions.
And these people...
in Nairobi.
These people are walking past gated communities with indoor plumbing and a water supply. And why are they in that circumstance? They're in that circumstance because they're poor.
Well, there's water crisis and resource crises all over the United States. If you look at the areas in which water parks are built, and the price of land, how low the price of land has to be in order for it to even be possible to build a water park, the people who live near water parks are experiencing comparable crises themselves, I'm sure.
So,
Well, until we understand in this country, every single one of us, and we translate it into our everyday activities, that not only is water absolutely essential every single moment for our very lives, it's finite. It is finite. Energy is not finite. There's always the sun.
yes.
Well,
You know, water is finite, so is air.
the-
Another problem. We're going to have an air crisis as well.
Well, what we haven't talked about, by the way,
Go ahead.
and I think in getting to the finite issue, water really isn't finite here. There's a tremendous body of water in this world called the oceans. I mean, there's the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, with unbelievable amounts of water that if it could be effectively desalinated and purified,
Big if.
would certainly fill the need of everybody's
Big if.
need for water.
But even
So,
if you did that,
again, what that comes back to, and there is desalination in certain areas of the world, and it is very expensive, and the technology has not been up to speed, but what it gets back to is the need for education, more scientific education, more work in this area, more funds delivered into this area to make that more affordable.
But we
so
all
that water, listen,
Have
plenty
to
of money goes in.
understand it's finite.
A lot of money went into being able to find the oil,
Oh,
get the oil. They spent tremendous amounts of money to do that because there was an economic
Incentive.
incentive to do it.
well, I think that
There's a more bigger incentive
But
for water.
not only is water finite, and there's only, I guess, 3% of the water supply in
Is
the
fresh
world
to
is
begin
fresh
with.
water. The freshwater supply is going to become more scarce because of
Global warming.
or climate
Absolutely,
change.
absolutely.
And so the evaporation takes away from the freshwater supply.
And this denial
The-
of the science of
right,
climate warming
the
is
melting-
unbelievably
Well,
dangerous.
it is
The
dangerous.
melting of the ice caps takes away from the freshwater supply. So if you don't deal with that, not only is you have the supply side and you have the demand side of water, and it is finite, but you have increasing demand for water on the one hand, and as water becomes more polluted, as we have more climate, as you have more climate change,
And as
you're
we have
gonna
more and more
find you're gonna have less
population.
water, and the population's increasing dramatically from when I had to provide water for a city, which was a gigantic city, urban Rome, compared to your urban cities, or compared to Nairobi or someplace like that.
Nairobi's pretty
So
big.
unless the problem's solved, there's not going to be enough water, and people are going to start fighting again over water rights. And in fact, your word for rivals, for competitors, comes from the Latin word revealus that we use, which means people who share the same stream or the same water supply, and
Or
they
the
will
same
get into
river as
conflicts
as-
over that water supply. So that's going to continue to happen
So,
unless,
wait a minute, I want to make sure we get that. Rival, the term rival,
yes,
which means enemies
right,
or competitors.
competitors.
Okay,
Opponents, whatever.
Opponents is derived
From the Latin term revealus, which means those who share the same stream.
That's an interesting
Well,
Those who share the same stream.
stream.
Or river.
Yes.
So,
But
but let me-
what we were saying, and what is extrapolated from that is, water becomes so scarce and so important that people will become combative over the water supply.
If
as
they
they
fought
are
over
in
oil,
many,
they fought over everything.
Right.
Why
as
wouldn't
they are
fight
in
over
many
water?
parts.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
why all of these things that we've put into play here, what we've discussed about conservation of water, using it properly, finding new ways to reuse water, finding ways to desalinate, all of these things are things that have to be accomplished in the near future so that these wars don't happen. So there aren't rivalries.
but
So
I
people
have a question.
Have the absolute ability to have water on a daily basis,
But
just as the people most people in this
I
country
have a
have
big
the
question
ability
about
to.
the technological, that's not how you say it, responses to all of this. The people who are fracking in Pennsylvania are telling us, oh, it's good for the environment because we can use natural gas instead of oil, but
Instead
they're
of
not.
being relying on the Middle East.
Right, but they never count what it costs really to get the gas out of the ground. They don't count the contaminated water supply that comes up when you're fracking, which is forcing high pressure water into rocks to blast them apart so that the natural gas is freed up and can be sucked out. They don't count the fact that earthquakes have to be paid for by somebody because they're caused by this fracking. They don't talk about the fact that trucks have to go to these areas where
What has to
fracking is trucks on little country roads, which they are wrecking, and which the local taxpayers have to keep in decent shape. It's costing somebody a lot of money. So when we talk about desalination, I want to know what the true costs are. I don't want to know what it costs the owner of the desalination plant. I want to know what it costs the neighbors. I want to know what it costs the state taxpayers. I want to know what other part of the environment is being ruined by desalinating water, because you can bet that something is. And I just don't believe in technological
It's
responses
with
to any of this.
Even if you could, with your technology, desalinize lots of saltwater lakes, even more than oceans, because the lakes are closer to the
Brackish.
areas they need to go to.
Brackish, right.
However, even if you do that, and even if it works, it's no reason to waste water or to squander water or to pollute water.
Right.
I mean, you can do your technology on the one hand and still
It should
conserve
be-
water and make sure the water's clean. I'm appalled that the water in the United States and in the world is so polluted. I think in Africa, over half the population doesn't have clean water. I think it's 43%, but I don't know for sure.
So that's,
to me, that
that's
should
what
never
Miss
happen. We did not,
Ogot was
Khamurabi
dealing
did not
with all
have
the
your
time.
technology. Us Romans did not have your technology.
We had fewer people to manage, though.
That's
And
true,
in a
but-
smaller
but-
geographic scope.
But with the number of people you had in Babylon and we had in Rome, we were able to provide clean water relative to the technology, way better than the industrialized countries do today.
Yeah, but what happens here, and you're right, but what happens here is that who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for the water or lack of water in certain parts of Africa? Well, up until now, it was the people who were leading those countries in Africa. They were the ones that were responsible for it. When they really can't handle it. So does it then become, and I think it does, as you know, the United Nations said, it becomes a world problem.
Does.
Of course
So
it's
the
a
rest of the world
problem.
has to come together to make this work for everybody. Now, we can't even do that in this country, let alone have everybody in the world come together with a single purpose to get something done.
But
It's
if we
just
would
that
listen to some
If
of the
we could,
people
well, by the way, if we could
struggled
do
with
this in this country, if we could, we would be an example for the rest of the world and for the United Nations to go out and to be able to do it for
But
the
that's-
rest of the world.
That's the same tired city on a hill logic that the Puritans came to the United States, to the land that later became the United States with. The fact is that while the United States would like to believe itself to be above every example of history and superior to every historical group and nation and empire, the United States is currently experiencing the exact same paroxysms that presage inevitable failure. So while it is a novel and noble idea to say that this crisis could be averted, and while it is also factual, it is not with that information.
Well, whatever's
actually
happening
true.
now,
It's
whatever's
not
happening
Factual,
now,
but not true.
No,
It's
no,
not
I
assured.
understand that, and whatever's happening now in the United States is an aberration.
As a kid, I can remember in history being taught about manifest destiny. Think of what that term means. What it sounds like to an 11-year-old kid. I think that's about the time they introduced manifest destiny in the public school system, at least when I was in school. And manifest, just the idea that somehow this was from God. And it was our destiny. God wanted us to go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And it did not matter. And when I say us, I mean the United States government. And it didn't matter who the people, the indigenous people. We didn't care about that because it was ordained that the United States would have that.
Yeah,
land.
in fact, in the last show, if we can refer back to the last show, John Foster Dulles was talking about the fact that Putin infringed on the rights of the Ukrainians and the people that lived in the Crimea, and they had a right to be independent. But as you say, when the United States was engaged in manifest destiny, nobody cared about the Native Americans. Nobody cared it was their land. It was our right to do it because it was in our self-interest. That doesn't make it right. It's not that the Indians shouldn't be, looked
Exactly.
at as being exploited. But we understand what the United States did, and it's no different than
what?
Putin's doing in the Ukraine or what the Russians had done before. People, nations act in their own self-interest, and the fact that the European countries didn't want Russia to have one waterport had nothing to do with morality, because they were doing immoral things in terms of colonialization. It had to do, they didn't want the competition. Again, I refer back to, not to be redundant, but
No.
I refer back to what I said before. They had people, they had resources, and they had land. All they needed was water.
And it will pass. And when it does pass, then we'll
What
be
is
back.
the aberration?
From
What's
your
an
lips to
aberration?
God's ear, what can I say?
I thank you, President Roosevelt, for illuminating that, because
From your
the
lips to
reality,
God's ear.
I do have trust
you have
that
trust.
this is this, like other situations
Will pass.
that we have faced, will pass.
But
And we will then move forward
your
with all of
optimism-
this idealistic stuff
Your
that we
optimism
think
is a
can
clear
become
sign that
realistic.
you have killed too many lions.
I did what? What was
You've
that?
killed too many lions.
That's why.
But
No
if we
man
would
who has
listen,
killed a disproportionate amount of lions would be that optimistic.
I think,
I haven't killed a lion
I
in a
think,
long time.
His Highness King Khamurabi is onto something, because it's a noble goal to say that the world and the nations of the world should band together to make sure that no country and those people in the world have clean water. You people in the world today can't even agree on keeping the air clean. You
That's
can't-
true.
You can't
252
even
countries
agree.
came together
That's
most
true.
recently
And you
to
have
sign
a-
an
you
agreement
have-
to do that. Whether it's followed
And
or
you
not
have a
is something
president
we'll
that
have to
doesn't,
see, but
that
they
wants
did.
to disband that. You have a
we
president.
know that.
But
We
you-
know
I just
that.
said that. We know
And
that.
that's the point. Here's what's interesting. So we have the 26th president seated here, looking at what's going on in the United States today, looking at and observing what the 45th president is doing. I mean, the executive orders, even the people that he puts in place. How can you take a person who thinks that the EPA should not exist and
The
make
Environmental Protection
that
Agency.
that the Environmental Protection Agency should not exist and say you are going to be the head administrator for the
Hey,
Environmental Protection
You
Agency?
put an anti-public school educator in charge of public schools. Why not that?
I mean, so I'm simply saying
Well,
it's,
and
it's,
what I said was that this period of time in our history will be seen later on as an aberration.
I hope
Because
so.
An aberration from what?
an aberration from the separation of powers and the way a democracy is supposed to run.
But when has the United States ever functioned in
We've
the way
done
that democracies
better
were supposed to run?
than
The
we're
United
doing
States,
now.
the
You
United
haven't-
States is one of the greatest empires in history.
Absolutely.
and with
And it
that,
has.
with that, we have to end this episode.
Oh, my
right,
goodness.
I know.
That was awful.
Yes, yes. I thank you.
We're just getting interesting.
We're just getting interesting. Please come back next week. We're going
I'm
to
gonna wait
try
on
to.
Khamurabi next week, that's for sure.
We are. President Roosevelt is going to attack King Khamurabi, and we are going to have a on Conversations Across Time. Thank you very much. Welcome to Conversations Across Time, the show that allows you, the viewer, to experience imaginary conversations between immortals, historical figures from different time periods. And so, the story begins. I am someone that's always been interested in history. So one of the things that in one of my former incarnations, I was a history teacher. And I thought that history was always taught when the kids could get interested in it and when they could have some understanding of the personalities. So I had this idea, and I was here at Philly Cam, and when I started talking about doing this show, the more people I talked to, the more people it seemed would be interested in the concept. So Babette explained to you that I saw her on a corner because Babette is a former state representative, and I knew that as a person with a feminist background and a progressive background, it would be wonderful to have her discuss things that were going on today, and we could apply it to historical instances. So what we do, what Conversations Across Time is, we take actors playing historical characters, and we have Babette and myself, and we ask them questions, and we mix the time periods. So that's why the title Conversations Across Time. So we may have Frederick Douglass having a conversation with Eleanor Roosevelt. This brings an interesting twist, and it gets you to know both of those personalities. So we're very excited about this, and we try to put people together that everyone would be surprised about. So we do Thomas Jefferson and Josephine Baker. I'm thinking we've done Abraham Lincoln, for instance, with Eleanor Roosevelt and Frederick Douglass. We also are doing Woodrow Wilson and a good German, and we're going to talk about how World War II came about, because the Treaty of Versailles was very instrumental in bringing about the hatred that Germany had and the feeling of regret that they had, and that's why Hitler could come to power. So we talk about history from a standpoint that makes it interesting, and we do hope that you enjoy us. It's controversial, it's not a polite conversation, it's just people going at it and discussing ideas, and we leave you to make your own judgments about what could have happened and also about the events that have happened to allow you to put them in perspective.
Conversations across time, 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 across time, conversations.
So here I am, waiting for a bus on a street corner when my friend Vivian drives by in a car and says, "Babette, I want you. I need you." So I thought, sure, and I had a card with me, my business card. I gave it to her, and I thought, I probably won't hear from Vivian again for a while, but right away she emailed me, she called me, and now I'm doing her concept, which is really, really interesting, to make history alive and to relate it to what's happening now in our country and our world.
Because no one at home cares. Your other esteemed guest is no other than Tupac Shakur.
Good evening, Mr. Shakur.
Good evening, Ms. Crawford. You want me to read her poem now?
The case was never challenged again before the court, and I don't know how I would have ruled on it. So
Hold on, homie, hold on. You got to know that's bullshit, right? This right here, this is exactly why, and I don't blame you for not saying anything, because you know you about to put your foot in your mouth. This right here,
I beg your pardon.
you saying that them not joining presented a clear and present danger.
if every man followed that, I don't know how
but what about the
persuasive,
clear and
then there
present
wouldn't be
danger
an
to the
army.
people? What about the clear and present danger to the young men who were signing up to get shot?
Mr. Tupac Shakur, welcome, Mr. Shakur.
Thank you for having me back. Wasn't sure y'all were gonna let me back. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
no, we aim to have spirited conversation here, so we are most pleased to have you back.
I know, you and I both know the only reason I got to come back on the show is because the host is black, but okay.
No, it's because you're dead.
In effect, you may not have a policy of eugenics, but you certainly do have the practical effects of eugenics.
I agree.
But why are we even talking about drug abuse?
She just agreed with you.
I'm changing the topic. Give me that.
Change the topic.
Damn.
I thought you were against
So
violence.
that ain't violence. She hit me with the fan. I'm preventing her from causing more violence. What I'm doing is the greatest good for the greatest number, especially the greatest number that includes my hands and arms.
I hope you join us for Conversations Across Time. It's an idea that has been germinating for a long time, and I believe there's something for everyone. It's education and entertainment.
Conversations across time, 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 conversations across time.